Doing well in English paper 3 is easy. I've come up with a question based on the set text, the Samaritan, and I'm going to show you step by step how you can easily get marks in that particular question. This is the question. After committing many wrongs, many people make great effort to avoid punishment, but they eventually face the consequences for their deeds. Referring to mercy in the Samaritan, write an essay in support of this assertion. You can see that this question restricts us to only one character, and that is mercy. We are supposed to talk about his wrongdoing, his effort to escape punishment, and how he eventually pays for his sins. My method of interpreting KCSE questions is still the same. You should first read the question carefully so that you know what it asks. The second step is to highlight the key words. Underline the most important words in the question. In this case, we have words like wrongs, great effort, and consequences. The third step is to identify or know the task in the question. What does the examiner demand from you? What are the requirements of the question? Now, for our question, in every paragraph, you have to show the wrongs that are committed or the wrong deeds that Mercy commits. You also have to show the great effort he takes to avoid punishment, and then link that to the consequences. Show that despite the great effort, he still suffers. And the lesson is, once we've committed wrongs, no matter the efforts we put in, we cannot escape punishment. Once you understand the tasks, then you move on to analyzing the character. That means you have to give us the actions of the character and the resulting outcomes. The actions and the outcomes. In this case, we have the actions as the great effort, what he does to avoid punishment. That is the action. So you must go back to the text and get enough details of those actions. And then the consequences. That is the outcome. How does he suffer? Well, once you're done with that, then you can try to come up with points of interpretation, and advise you to come up with that 5 to 10 points of interpretation. But in the answering, we only need 4. Well, let me remind you the question. After committing wrongs, many people make great efforts to avoid punishment, but they eventually face the consequences for their deeds. Referring to mercy in the Samaritan, write an essay in support of this assertion. I'm going to begin with the introduction. In the introduction, all we need to see is, have you understood the question as a student? You should try to give us a paraphrase or how you've understood the question. In John Lara's The Samaritan, Mayor Mercy commits various wrongs, including corruption, abuse of office, misuse of public resources, intimidation, violence, and manipulation of the justice system. You don't have to mention all of them in the introduction. You can just mention 1 or 2. Then after committing these wrongs, Mercy makes great effort to avoid punishment. That is the idea. But instead of saying that, you can say Mercy uses different methods to protect himself and remain in power. That is making great effort to avoid punishment. So always try to paraphrase. You can use synonyms of the key words in the introduction so that you are not repeating the question word for word. These methods include suppression, intimidation, conspiracy, bribery, violence, blackmail, and even blame shifting. In the introduction, you don't have to mention all of them. You can just mention 1 if you have to. For example, you can talk about Mercy uses different methods to protect himself and remain in power. So Mercy uses different methods like bribery and violence to protect himself from power. Or just 1. You can just say Mercy uses different methods like bribery to protect himself and remain in power. Then the introduction would be full, or the introduction would be complete if you mention the fact that, however, his efforts eventually fail. His corruption is exposed and he is eventually arrested, removed from office, and publicly humiliated. Now, your introduction can read something simple like, wrongdoers may try to escape punishment, but they eventually face the repercussions or ramifications or consequences of their actions. I'm going to talk about a possible point that a student can write, and we have many points, but I'll just look at a few. Many students fail because of inadequate textual illustrations. I'm going to talk about how Mosi tries to avoid punishment by trying to suppress the Samaritan app. Mosi tries to suppress the Samaritan app because he fears that it will expose his corrupt dealings. That is the first sentence, and as you can see, it answers the question. He is also afraid that the app will expose his corruption, cost him his job, or lead to his persecution. Then you give us some background. Mosi is expected to officially launch the app in Maracas municipality. However, after realizing that the innovation threatens corrupt leaders, he repeatedly postpones its launch. Give us exact details from the text. What does he do in order to try and suppress the app? He orders Nicole and even Principal Nareen to stop all activities related to the app. He directs Nicole to write to the Ministry of Education. He wants her to highlight alleged flaws in the app. That is on just between page 15 and 18, you can see that. He further instructs Harvester to issue a circular banning unauthorized apps. That is on page 28. He proposes hacking the app and even sabotaging the Samaritan. If you read page 27 to 28, you can get that information. Then now you get to the consequences. That is the effort. Now, what are the consequences? Despite all these efforts, the app continues exposing corruption. Newspapers such as the Caribbean Watch and the Sentinel publicize the corruption scandals even further. That's on page 21. Mosi eventually becomes increasingly worried about possible prosecution. The panic on page 30 and 55. Now, we don't only talk about the arrest, we even talk about the panic and the worry that he has before the arrest. That would be part of the consequences. Then his problems increase when he suffers a vote of no confidence. That's on page 38. Eventually, his attempts to suppress the truth fail. He is finally arrested for corruption and abuse of office. That is on page 138. And I encourage a student to give us details of the publicly humiliating arrest. On page 138, he is shocked alongside the other leaders when Tajo walks in and says, "I am Inspector Tajo, head of the National Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau." And in unison, the leaders stand up and say, "Anti-Corruption Investigations Bureau." And then Tajo says that he's supposed to escort them to the headquarters of Anti-Corruption Investigations Bureau. Then a commotion ensues. We see the mayor trying to hide behind Nicole, while others shuffle around on their feet in confusion. The mayor and the others are then handcuffed and bundled out, and we see Alvita saying, "You can never escape from the consequences of their action," as they watch the men being bundled out. It is a humiliating experience for the mayor, and that shows that indeed, after committing many wrongs, you can make effort to escape punishment, but eventually you suffer consequences of their actions. That is just one point, and a student is supposed to write an introduction, 4 points, and a conclusion. In the other videos, we will talk about the other points. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and if you need further guidance, you can DM so that we can get your number, and then we talk about remedial lessons.